Hey guys, Austin here, it's Riverside Anglers, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to get out of and how to avoid getting a backlash. Now, if any fisherman knows that whenever they start out with a baitcaster, you're always going to get a few backlashes. So I'm just going to teach you guys a few tips of how to get out of a backlash and how to avoid a backlash. Now first, when you're using a baitcaster, always make sure that you have the right type of line, especially when you're starting out. So if you're just starting out and you're just learning how to cast a baitcaster, I would highly recommend using braided line. Braided line is just a lot more relaxed when you're casting, and you're less likely to get into a backlash with it. Now, if you're using monofilm or fluorocarbon, you're more likely to get into a backlash. So if you're just starting out on casting a baitcaster, I would highly recommend using braided line because it's a lot more relaxed. Now next, I'm going to teach you guys just how to avoid a backlash in general. And just changing a few settings on your baitcaster reel will basically allow you to avoid getting a backlash. Now first, I'm going to talk about the two types of drags on the reel, on a baitcaster reel. So typically, the more modern and most baitcaster reels will have a star drag, which is basically right here. The star drag is usually always next to your handle, and it basically controls your main drag. It controls how much line a fish will pull out when you have a fish on. And another drag is this dial drag right here. As you can see, you can change it at any time. Usually, I don't really pay attention to that much, but for bait casting, for just casting in general, I always would recommend putting your dial drag at 0. It just allows your spool to be really loose, and it doesn't tighten your spool at all. And it just saves you from getting a lot of backlashes. Now your star drag, basically, that you don't really have to play around with that much to really avoid getting a backlash. Just basically tighten up whenever you have a fish. Basically that. But most new baitcaster reels have basically this sleeve, this little knob right here. And this knob basically tightens or loosens your spool, and basically allows you to adjust your spool tightness to whatever weight lure you have. So basically, every time you change your lure weight on a baitcaster reel, I would highly recommend always changing this so that it's tight enough so that it won't release a lot of line and just keep backlashing, and it'll allow you to just basically get good casting distance. So basically, I'm going to show you guys how to adjust this. So now I just basically have a 3/4 of an ounce lure on. Basically, just take your baitcaster reel, tighten this sleeve up, this knob up the whole way until you can't tighten it anymore. Then press this button right in the back of your reel, which basically releases your spool. But as you can see, your spool is tightened up right now because this knob is tightened up the whole way, so it will not allow the spool to move. So then basically just loosen the spool very slowly until you start to see your spool moving a little bit. So I'm just slowly adjusting it. As you can see, my spool is starting to move a little bit. Once you see that movement, that really fast movement, you're pretty much good to go. Just basically tighten your reel back up, and you're basically good to go then. So that's basically how to adjust your spool to whatever lure weight you have. Now next, I'm going to show you guys how to get out of a backlash. Okay guys, now I'm going to show you guys how to get out of a backlash. So basically, when you have a backlash, I'm just going to show you guys a few tips of how to get out of a backlash. So now, as you can see, my baitcaster reel has a backlash right here. This one isn't too bad. So some tips that I'll typically tell you guys is basically don't pull too hard on your line. So basically, if you start pulling really hard on your line, typically the line will just start digging deeper into your spool, and basically eventually you'll never be able to get out of your backlash. One tip I'll also tell you guys is never reel in when you have backlash. So backlash that I have right here, just don't start reeling in, or else your line will just keep overlapping and overlapping, and eventually your line will just get so tangled that you won't get it out. Another tip that I like to tell you guys is sometimes when you have backlash, typically the line will just get caught and it will not move, even when you press the button down and the spool is released. Typically what I like to do is I'll roll my thumb back and forth like this, and I'll just pull lightly out. As you can see, that usually just helps really pull most of the line out. And then after you start really getting it out, just pull out all the tangles until your spool looks really nice and smooth, until the point where pretty much you're good to go then. Another tip that I like to do is sometimes if I have a lot of loops or a lot of really tangled line, I'll usually just like to pull it out sort of like this, just so the line just sort of pulled out, and then I'll just pull out sort of hard, not too hard, and then I'll just keep doing that until the point where I can actually get my line out, and I can actually pull my line out to the point where it's actually, the backlash is pretty much out. Now sometimes when you have backlash, they're to the point where you can't really get a backlash out. Now sometimes that rarely happens, but if that ever happens to you guys, pretty much just get a pair of pliers, just start pulling your line out like I just did. Just start pulling it out and basically just cut those loops, all the overlapping line, and just basically start pulling it out until all the backlash is out. Sometimes backlashes will just be to the point where you can't get them out, and really the best thing to do is just to cut them out. So basically that's all I really wanted to cover on how to get out of the backlash. Don't forget to just check out any of my other videos. Drop a like on this video if you thought it was informational. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.